Hello there. In this video, I'm going to talk about West York Coach Lines. This was a bus operator that operated in the city's West End, specifically between York, Etobicoke, and Malton. So, let's get into the video. The origins of West York Coach Lines can be found in the early 1930s. At that time, the TTC's operational mandate was exclusively within the city of Toronto. While the TTC would operate a small number of routes beyond the city's boundary, this was done under contract. Public transit outside of the city proper would need to be handled by the individual municipalities. West York Coach Lines was one such operator. West York was a private bus operator operating primarily within the western half of the York Township. It would also operate service into Swansea, Etobicoke, and Malton. The company was founded by a Mr. J.J. Heath as West York and District Coach Lines and began operations on its first bus route on June 13, 1932. This was the Eileen bus, which operated between the Junction and the Lambton area. Specifically, this route ran from the intersection of Keele and Vine, north to St. Clair, west to Runnymede Road, north to Henrietta Street, west to Castleton, north to Pritchard Avenue, west to Jane Street, north to Florence Crescent, and then west on it and Eileen Avenue to an on-street loop via Bernice Crescent and Scarlet Road. This would be the company's lone route for the next 5 years. West York's garage and headquarters would be located at 444 Pacific Avenue and was made up of the aforementioned garage, an adjacent house which had been converted into office space, and a body shop around the corner at 145 Vine Avenue. The company also owned an empty lot at 2987 Dundas Street West, which was used to park buses. On April 15, 1937, the company would begin service on its second route. This was a high school bus route meant to ferry students from the southern part of York Township to Weston Collegiate in the village of Weston. Specifically, this route would operate from Eileen Avenue and run north along Scarlet Road and then east on Lawrence Avenue to Pine Street in the village of Weston. Naturally, this route would only operate during school hours. 8 months later, on December 14th, the company would begin service on its third route, that being the Westmount bus. This route would parallel the Eileen bus from Keele and Vine to Scarlet Road. From there, it would run north to Dixon Road, which was called Malton Road at the time, and then run west to Royal York Road. During rush hour, some Westmount buses would instead continue west along St. Clair to Scarlet Road. A year later, on November 1st, 1938, the company's fourth route would begin service, that being the Malton Weston bus. This was a rush hour only service that operated from Weston Road, west on Lawrence, north on Scarlet Road, and west on Dixon Road to Derry Road in the village of Malton. This route would also serve Malton Airport. The outbreak of World War II would be both a blessing and a curse for Toronto's bus operators. On one hand, the rationing of materials like gas and rubber would have a major impact on bus service around the region. On the other hand, the war would see ridership grow as men and women commuted to and from new and old wartime factories inside and out of the city. In the case of West York Coach Lines, this would include the growing aviation industry in the village of Malton. On April 6, 1942, the company would begin service on its fifth bus route, that being the Malton, Bloor, and Jane bus. This route would operate from an on-street loop via Willard Avenue, Ostend, and Windermere Avenue. It would then run west along Bloor and Dundas Streets to Highway 27, now Highway 427. The route would then run north to Dixon Road and west to Derry Road in Malton, also serving the airport in the process. Buses were, however, not allowed to pick up passengers east of Poplar Avenue. The reason for this is unclear, as this is well beyond Toronto's city limit. However, Grey Coach Lines may have had an exclusive license to operate service along this part of Bloor Street. Starting on June 21, 1942, due to wartime rationing, the eastern terminus of the Eileen and Westmount buses would be changed, with buses now terminating at Runnymede Road and Maria Street. This change would last until November 1, 1944. On January 9, 1945, service on the Malton, Bloor and Jane bus would be changed, as now the route would stay on Bloor Street to Highway 27 instead of running along Dundas. On May 24, 1945, West York would purchase the Swansea bus from Danforth Bus Lines, although the service would be discontinued a year later on October 21, 1946. On October 25, 1945, the Malton Weston bus would see the eastern end of its route changed, as it would now run south on Weston Road and Keele Street to Vine Avenue. The route would also be renamed to Malton, Dundas and Keele. An interesting quirk of this extension was that during rush hours, one could see both the TTC's Weston Trolley Bus and West York's Malton Dundas bus operating along Weston Road and serving virtually the same passengers. A rare glimpse of interlined bus service, although West York buses were not allowed to pick up passengers south of Northland Avenue, as that was the city limit. In early 1946, the company would change its name from West York and District Coach Lines to West York Coach Lines Limited. It was likely at this point that ownership of the company transferred to Edward B. Seedhouse, who was the owner of the West York Motors Chevrolet dealership. As part of this, the company's headquarters was moved to the West York Motors dealership at 1785 St. Clair Avenue West, although the office at Pacific Avenue remained as the main traffic office for the bus network. On June 12, 1947, the company would restart service on the Swansea bus, which would operate a service between the village of Swansea and Sunnyside. The route would start at the intersection of Queen and Roncesvalles, and then run west on Lakeshore Boulevard, north on Riverside Drive, and then east on Bloor Street to an on-street loop via Willard, Ostend, and Windermere Avenues. West York would also receive permission to operate the Swansea bus north up Jane Street to Runnymede Collegiate during school hours. On January 22, 1948, West York would begin service on its seventh and final bus route, that being the Malton-Brampton bus. I couldn't find what route this bus took, but it was ultimately a short-lived route, as it was sold to Parkinson Coach Lines a year later in 1949. By this point, service on the Westmount bus had changed, as it would no longer terminate at Dixon and Royal York. Instead, buses would now run west along Lawrence Avenue and then run north on Royal York to the Sanctuary Park Cemetery. The southern terminus of the Westmount and Eileen buses had also changed, as they would now perform an on-street loop via Dundas Street, Mavity Street, and Annette Street. The annual ridership on the routes was as follows in 1951. The Eileen bus had an annual ridership of 724,000 riders. The Westmount bus had an annual ridership of 187,000 riders. The Malton Bloor bus had an annual ridership of 517,000 riders. Lastly, the Malton Keele bus had an annual ridership of 103,000 riders. Service on the network was as follows starting in May of 1952. The Eileen bus ran every 30 minutes off-peak and every 10 minutes during rush hour. A single fare was 10 cents for adults and 5 cents for children. A set of 3 tickets could be bought for 25 cents. Service on the Westmount bus was every 60 minutes off-peak and every 30 minutes during rush hour. Fares were the same as the Eileen bus. Service on the Malton, Dundas, and Keele bus was every 40 minutes during rush hour. Adult fares were 35 cents while child fares were 20 cents. A set of 4 tickets could be bought for $1.20. Service on the Malton, Bloor, and Jane bus was every 80 minutes off-peak and every 20 minutes during rush hour. Fares were the same as the Malton, Dundas, and Keele bus. Finally, West York Coach Lines did not issue or accept transfers, so transferring routes would require another fare or ticket. The final changes in service would come on May 1st, 1953. Firstly, the Westmount bus would see a change as now some buses would operate to Rexdale Boulevard. Specifically, these buses would turn east on Lawrence Avenue and run to South Station Street. From there, they would backtrack and follow Lawrence and Dixon Road to Islington Avenue. They would then run north to Rexdale Boulevard. The Malton, Dundas, and Keele bus would also see a change as now some buses would run to Rexdale Boulevard. Specifically, buses would now operate east along Derry Road and Rexdale Boulevard to Islington Avenue. They would then run south to Dixon Road. That same year, the company would also purchase the two houses immediately west of the garage. These houses would be torn down and the space used as a parking lot for buses. Service for West York coaches would come to an end on July 1st, 1954, as on that day it would be folded into the Toronto Transit Commission, thus ending 22 years of service. That year, the TTC was uploaded to the newly created Metropolitan Toronto government, and as a result, its operational mandate now encompassed the entirety of Toronto and not just the old city proper. By the end of operations, West York Coach Lines employed 51 personnel, including 27 drivers, 6 mechanics, 3 office staff, 2 apprentices, 2 servicemen, 1 bodyman, 1 lubricator, 1 part-time stockkeeper, 1 delivery driver, 1 janitor, 1 foreman, 1 assistant foreman, 1 inspector, 1 dispatcher, 1 manager, and 1 assistant manager. The company had a fleet of 28 buses made up of 5 twin 38Ss, 4 Aerocoach P4637s, 3 twin 41Ss, 3 Ford 99Ts, 2 Ford 72Ts, 2 Ford 19Bs, 2 Fitzjohn Duraliners, 2 flexible 29 B147s, 1 twin 34S, 1 twin FI35, 1 Rio 96 HTD, 1 Prevost 33 PU49, and 1 FLX White 218W151. The TTC would take on all but one of these buses, with all local and suburban spec buses being used by the TTC, while the interurban spec buses were sent to Grey Coach Lines. The lone bus not taken by the TTC was the Rio 96 HTD, which was sold to Greer Transport. Lastly, on January 31st, 1954, the company had revenue of $370,761.28, expenses of $280,367.07, and a net profit of $27,190.83. By the end of service, West York Coach Lines had a network of 6 routes made up of 4 all-day services and 2 rush-hour-only services. These services would connect the City of Toronto to York, Etobicoke, Weston, and Malton and lay the groundwork for bus routes we see today. Service along Weston Road would become part of the 89 Weston bus. Service along St. Clair Avenue west of Keele would become part of the 189 Stockyards. Service along Scarlett Road would become part of the 79 Scarlett bus. Service along Lawrence and Dixon Road to Malton would become part of the 52 Lawrence West bus. Service to Rexdale would become part of the 37 Islington bus. Service along Jane Street would become part of the 35 Jane bus. Service along Bloor Street West would become part of the 49 Bloor West bus. Finally, service along Highway 27 would become part of the 900 Airport Express and 927 Highway 27 Express buses. While the bulk of the network's bus routes live on, does anything remain of the company's infrastructure? The answer to that question is unfortunately no. West York Coach Lines never had much infrastructure to begin with, as they only had a garage and office. They didn't construct any off-street turnback loops. The site of the company's old garage and traffic office is now houses. The site of the old bus parking lot is now a commercial development. Finally, the company's former headquarters is now a condominium, although the Chevrolet dealership that once housed West York Motors was there until 2019. West York Coach Lines was an important part of Toronto's transit history, as it would bring public transit to the western half of the city, connecting the residents of York, Etobicoke, and Malton to the city and the residents from the city to the airport. While the company is now long gone, its impact lives on in the various bus routes that now run through Toronto's West End. And with that, I will end this video here. Thank you for watching this video, and if you enjoyed it and want to see more like it, please hit that subscribe button because there are more videos like it on the channel, and there are more videos like it on the way. If there's anything you want to say about West York Coach Lines, don't be afraid to do so in the comments section down below. And with that, I'll see you in the next video.